Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Blue White Illustrated live postgame show on YouTube presented by On3. I'm Tom Hannfian. He is Thomas Frank Carr. Penn State dropped its second loss of the season by a score of 44-31 to the still unbeaten number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes in a game that I think had a lot of Penn State fans really worried coming into it. And honestly, there are a lot of positives to take away from this game, considering how tough the Nittany Lions played the Buckeyes today. 3+ quarters of really good football. And then obviously the wheels kind of came off down the stretch there. Just a reminder for those of you that are joining us here on YouTube, if you want to donate to the channel, you can get involved in the super chat. Your questions and comments will be highlighted, and we'll address as many of those super chat donations here live on the show as humanly possible. And just a reminder for those of you that are not already subscribed to Blue White Illustrated, right now it's just $10 for a subscription to Blue White Illustrated from now until the start of next season. That's a fantastic deal. So head to on3.com and search Blue White Illustrated for the homepage to sign up today. So we know you guys are going to be all over the chat, so please get involved. T. Frank, just taking the macro view of this game, as I was just saying a moment ago, this is a much more positive loss than the Michigan loss was. Absolutely. What's your initial takeaway from this game?
Penn State played with Ohio State, the best team in the nation, deep into the fourth quarter, but they got out-athleted at the end. I thought Penn State came in with a great game plan. They took away Ohio State's running game, which was kind of the question in my mind of how would Manny Diaz play this game, and how would Penn State's defensive scheme, how they're built, how would that work against Ohio State's running system? Because Ohio State plays zone. They play zone, inside, outside, and they force you to beat their athletes in that particular style. That's what Penn State shuts down. They have done a great job at shutting down zone running so far this season, and they did through 3.5 quarters. Ohio State averaged 1.9 yards per carry until the fourth quarter, where they averaged 15 yards because the Ohio State passing game was that good. Ohio State gave up on running the football, and then they started throwing the ball all over the yard, and you see 185 yards or whatever it ended up being for Marvin Harrison Jr., because that's the strength of the team. That's what they are, and that was kind of the end of the ball game, was when Ohio State, especially that backbreaker of a drive where they go 3 plays, 75 yards, and they did what they do. They have 5-star athletes. Penn State's a very good team. They were playing with them the entire game, but they're going to go get a barrage of points. So James Franklin going for it deep into the red zone. That's what that says. Early in the game, Penn State needed to bank some points, because when this happened, it happened pretty quickly. And the defensive turnovers, especially, and some of those interceptions, I know we're going to have lots of conversation about Sean Clifford in this game, but those clearly changed the tenor of the game late as much as they did set up Ohio State for some points early. So lots of stuff to pick through, but I think overall Penn State played with maybe the best team in the country for almost 4 quarters.
I completely agree with you. This is obviously, you never want to see a loss. This was a really good performance. Overall, I was so impressed to see the defense respond and play as similarly as they did against Minnesota last weekend. I want to thank Stephen Light for donating. I don't know if this is you being entirely sarcastic or being serious, but I don't know about you guys, but I'm psyched to see Clifford in the Orange Bowl. We'll dive into the performance of Sean Clifford, but in regards to a possible New Year's Day 6 bowl game, I think that's a very plausible thing for this Penn State football team, given the effort that we just saw, because frankly, the rest of the way, T. Frank, you and I were just talking about before we came on the air, is that it's at Indiana, it's home versus Rutgers, home versus Maryland, at Rutgers, home versus Michigan State. All very winnable football games. If I told you coming into 2022 that Penn State could go 10-2, you might have laughed at me. I know I would have laughed at me.
Well, I was a little more positive. I was saying 9-3 was kind of where I was looking at it, because this is a very talented freshman class. I saw a lot of similarities to 2019, where they arrived a year early. And with the freshman running backs and Abdul Carter, they arrived a year or maybe a year and a half early, but also they're all freshmen, and they did not, I think, play up to that standard of playing against one of the best teams in the country to go toe-to-toe, not make any mistakes. Just as a general, as a freshman class, because that's where the true high-end talent is. So 10-2, I think, is a surprise, but I don't know that it is a stretch, given that this team generally, when they're right, when they're, kind of correct, they've played with every team that is on their schedule. The last 2 years obviously put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, but the overall talent was better this year coming in.
Agreed. Jeff D, thank you for contributing to the Super Chat and donating to Blue White Illustrated. What is it going to take to close the gap with Ohio State? PSU recruits top 10 classes, so it can't be talent alone. They don't coach said classes to success. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't agree necessarily. I do agree with parts of this that it's not a huge talent gap, but it is a talent gap. Over the last 3 seasons, Penn State kind of took a step back. Ryan Day has hit the accelerator at a program that has a lot of built-in advantages of being Ohio State. So, I think this is much about Ohio State as it is Penn State, where with Urban Meyer and some of the things that we all saw, how kind of that ended ugly, like Penn State was inching closer. Now I feel like with Jim Knowles and the coaching, even though I didn't think Ryan Day did a great job coaching the offense today. There were
some interesting play calls. Yeah.
Yeah, and in this game, like, the talent won out. So I don't want to disagree completely and say that it's not coaching. The offensive line needs to progress. That group needs to get better, but they are not on the same level as Ohio State. Penn State is really excited about some of their young offensive linemen. Drew Shelton, Vega Ioane. I know coming in the class of 2023, they got a lot of talent. But Ohio State starting a 5-star true freshman right guard, and he was a big part of the win today. So there is a difference in the two teams and their recruiting, and the difference between 1, 2, and 3 and 5-star talent, and where Penn State is at 12 routinely, kind of sometimes bumping up higher there. And I know that 2022 they got the 5 stars, right? So they got that class into the top 5. But that's one. Ohio State is doing that year in and year out, and they're banking talent so that Jackson Smith and Jigba goes down. And even though Penn State played with them in this game, you got a Marvin Harrison Jr. You've got a Julian Fleming who can get open and get 20 yards in the middle of the field. Emeka Ibuka was shut out for most of the game, and then he gets a perfect 42-yard pass in tight coverage versus Johnny Dixon, a good football player. Emeka Ibuka made a better play in CJ Stroud, who was, despite the stats, I didn't think he was great today until he made some of those wow type of throws. Makes a perfect play there. And there are just these small losses throughout the year that lead to recruiting losses, and then your game day decisions are magnified. Penn State played the game from a coaching perspective that kept them in this game till the fourth quarter. They had a great game plan on both sides of the football coming into the game, into the contest. But some of the decisions, the fourth down play, I was not a fan of the fourth down play where they drive down and get no points.
In the third quarter,
in the third quarter,
25, of Ohio State.
If you take those 3 points, I know that we're just doing, ifs and buts here. That doesn't do anything for you in the final tally. Ohio State responded with touchdown in the fourth quarter. Now, that doesn't mean that it changes the tenor of the game going forward and the butterfly effect, all those things. Like, we can't parse that out. But I thought overall, Penn State played with this team better than I expected. And they played with them deeper and longer than I expected. But eventually, JT Tuimoloau took the game over. Like, his ability to beat Penn State's right tackle changed the dynamics of this game. Bryce Effner, he was just completely and absolutely overmatched in this game, and goes back to recruiting and depth. Penn State is light on tackles to begin with, and then Bryce Effner is playing left tackle at the end of the game with Olu not in there. That's another huge concern. Is Penn State? What's the situation with him? Where you've got Jimmy Christ at right tackle. This was break glass in case of scenario. Horrible situation for Penn State if either of their tackles got hurt. And it seems like, at least at the end of the game, we'll find out, or we won't find out, truthfully, with James Franklin, what happened there. But that's a huge problem. That is a huge problem. Not that it affected the game, but it's just that depth of talent there.
I do want to get to some of the comments here in the super chat. Pete, thank you for donating. I saw a lot more to be proud of and encouraged by in this game. Defense played very well, and the offense got no bounces. I'm proud of our boys. Pete, I agree with you, and I think T. Frank does as well. Just there was a lot to be positive about. I know a lot of people want to come down on Sean Clifford, and I do want to bring up this one. Thank you for donating, counting down the games until we can finally get Clifford out of State College. When you reasonably look at this game for Sean Clifford, I said it on my podcast. For those of you that don't know, check out Pater to Penn State Football Show with myself and former Penn State quarterback Matt McGloin. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, wherever you get your podcasts. In our preview episode regarding this game against Ohio State, we said, and I think a lot of people have said, that Sean Clifford has to play the best game of his life. He admitted that to the Fox broadcast crew as well. That was a huge point early in the broadcast. Sean clearly would probably admit he didn't play his best game. However, T. Frank, when you analyze his 4 turnovers, do you pin them all on Sean Clifford?
So now we're gonna get into the shouting.
Well, let me do it for you. The first one is tipped, and I know a lot of people will say, "Well, he's got to know how to throw it around big guys." It's like, listen, these things happen to quarterbacks at every single level of football. It is a freak play that it gets tipped and picked. The fact that it got tipped, yes, you can sit there and luck, say, "Right, we should have done that." Right? We
should agree that a tipped pass that results in an interception by the defensive end on the other side of the formation is luck. You can say the batted pass is his fault, and that's fine. And we can have a conversation about that. Ohio State was ready, and the offensive line did not give him protection on the last one at the very least.
Yes.
The second one I would say is the biggest debate, right? Did Kaytron Allen run the right route? And most importantly, did Sean Clifford read the defense correctly? So here's the situation on that play. It's cover 3, but it's drop 8. So there's an extra underneath defender. And I don't know if Sean Clifford read that or not, but if he's reading cover 3, which is what the coverage shell dictates, Kaytron Allen should have run an out route so he can hit upfield and get the first down. But if you throw it to Parker Washington in soft cover 3 coverage and you get it over the defensive end, that's also a good pass. So, that's that. You've got to ask the quarterback, what did you see? Why did you do that? What is and he probably won't throw the freshman under the bus. But I think there's more debate about that one. And then the final interception, Bryce Effner got buried in the ground by the pass rusher, Tuimoloau. I don't know if it was a one-arm hump where he just threw him out of the way, but either way, Bryce Effner was on his back, providing zero coverage in the passing lane for the quarterback. Another quick strike, trying to throw a bubble screen. Lots of teams throw bubble screens. Not every single defensive end catches it and runs for a touchdown. So were those Sean Clifford's fault? I'm not saying they're not Sean Clifford's fault. I'm not saying they're completely Sean Clifford's fault. So changing the arm angle, being a better quarterback, those are things that Sean Clifford doesn't do. If you're suddenly expecting him to do those things, then, sorry to disappoint you, here's the end result. But secondarily, that might be your problem, is that he can't do those things, which, at this point, I'm analyzing Sean Clifford and what he does, not necessarily in what he doesn't do, because we know what he doesn't do. And he threw for 371 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had them in the game the entire time. And those situations were the turning points, right? 44-31. They gave up a lot of points on turnovers.
If you don't give up 4 turnovers, you're in this game with, as you said, the second best team in the nation, depending on who you ask. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I know a lot of people. It's just the fatigue with Sean Clifford for 4 years as a starter, 6 years at Penn State. I totally understand it, but when you really sit there and break this game down, you cannot hang the entire thing on this guy. It's just not reasonable. Getting into more of the super chat contributions. Thank you to Mike Porter giving Marvin Harrison Jr. 11 on 3rd and 10. Is a joke. I give a lot of credit to Marvin Harrison Jr. He is outstanding. They went to him so many different times. CJ Stroud was firing bullets to him on post routes every chance that he got and was completing most of them. Joey Porter Jr., in my opinion, didn't necessarily have a fantastic day. I don't know what you saw out of Joey, but it continues to be, for me, first round body and then questionable decision making.
So here's one of the things I did not like in this game. They have gone to this, instead of being, getting picked a lot, they've gone to this kind of like picket fence defense on 3rd down. Everyone's standing at the sticks, and they go to their pressure package, and then teams just run slants on it and fall for the first down. They don't want to give up the big play, right? Because it's man coverage. It's man coverage across the board. There's no safety help, so you can't give up a double move, but you're reacting and you're supposed to come triggering downhill when you see the slant, but you don't want to give up the deep play. So what you do is you give up the first down. Like, that's all that's happening in those situations. So if Joey Porter Jr. is playing tighter coverage, we might be having a different situation. I think that part is where you're not set up for success. And but at the same time, trigger downhill, get the tackle, and don't give up the first down. Like, it is both. It is, I don't like that play call. I don't like that defensive formation. They've given up more points or more yardage and more first downs that they've taken away. So I think that needs to adjust going forward. But at the same time, in that situation, know your role, know your rules, and they did not attack the ball in that third down situation the way you would want them to stop that play. And giving up those passes, that was a backbreaker. But I disagree. I think Joey Porter Jr. has played up to the hype so far this year, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is really, really good. I mean, those were a lot of contested catches, and he came down with them. So you're at the catch point, and then it becomes a fight for the ball. But if the ball placement is good, and the ball placement was good today from CJ Stroud, it's tough to defend the best passing attack in America. It's tough to defend the best passing attack in America. That's how I read that situation.
I agree with you. Kevin diving in here in the super chat. Great effort today. Talent gap finally caught up with them in the fourth quarter. I think Fashanu made himself some money today. And as T. Frank was just mentioning, we are not certain whether or not Olu Fashanu sustained an injury or if he was just outright benched in the game. So we may never know the answer to that. And the way James Franklin conducts himself in the media. So I encourage everybody to keep an eye on that. Mike, also thank you for diving in here, contributing to the super chat. If I ever have to watch the soft coverage giving them a free first down on 3rd and 10 ever again, I will harm myself. Sarcastic. Yeah, Mike, don't harm yourself. We appreciate that. But yeah, kind of just what you were just talking about, T. Frank.
I want to say Mike is a regular here, so I appreciate him giving us the real deal, because I've come to care about Mike and some of the regulars. By the way, I did want to address something from early in the week, some inside baseball. If you're not a regular here in the BWI Daily Edition, we do 2 live shows a week. We do it here on the postgame show and Monday to recap and then preview. So our other shows are, like if you watch PTI Around the Horn, they're recorded and then played live. So that's what we do late in the week. So I know, like, Larry's a regular here, and he asked a couple questions earlier this week and got a little frustrated that nobody was responding. Normally I'm in the chat and I'm talking to people and I'm responding and letting people know kind of the situation. But late in the week, my in-laws were here. I was with them, and I was not able to be on the show. So I just want to apologize to the people that were in the chat and discussing and talking about Penn State football with us heading up into the game. I hope that we didn't damper any of your excitement about the game, and I'm glad that we've got a lot of the regulars here. So I wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page coming into this post-game show, because I appreciate every single one of you that watches the show on a regular basis. You are the reason we can do this.
Agreed. Don't apologize for being with your family, but I just want to point that out.
For the miscommunication. How about that? I apologize for the miscommunication.
You're getting all red in the face. I don't want to see that happen any more than it already is. Dominic getting involved. This is the biggest question every Penn State football fan has. Would you say we should play Drew Aller now? What does it help starting Sean Clifford?
Going 10-2. That's, again, a successful season. You don't know what you don't know. We've talked about this all season, like getting through these 2 games. They go 1-3 in the big 3-game stretch, and then the rest of the wins are guaranteed. When has a win against Michigan State ever been guaranteed with James Franklin's teams? Like, it was supposed to be a win last year. They play in a blizzard. It doesn't go well. They lose that game as well. I had people, on the BWI message board during the thread, the game thread, saying they're down 10-0. What do you have to lose by putting Drew Aller in? Because it's 2 interceptions. And again, nobody's parsing. People in the chat are saying, why are you parsing Sean Clifford? He's mediocre. It doesn't matter. Sure. But if you're the coaching staff and you have worked 80 plus hours to get to the point where you are within a touchdown with Ohio State in the fourth quarter, holding them under 40 points in the fourth quarter with 9 minutes left, and you went on a 13-play drive and you got a touchdown to go get the lead, that's why you're playing Sean Clifford, because you don't believe that Drew Aller is going to be the guy that can help you do that. And here's the thing, fans, neither do you. You don't know what he's going to do against Indiana next week. You don't know what he's going to do against Rutgers. I understand the desire to see somebody else play after a 3-interception game, wanting to see something new, wanting to see, the hope and the future. I understand that this Clifford experiment feels like a dead end, but tell those players in the locker room that having a 10-win season and trying your best to win every single football game, that now we're playing the backup quarterback because the rest of the season doesn't matter. You aren't getting any more wins. Like, you get a team to not believe in the message you send. Now, if Drew Aller truly is the best option, which again, we don't know, we have not seen him play a full game. I'm reserving judgment that the coaching staff aren't blind idiots, which I understand you think that, right? I understand that fans think that's the case. I'm not there. I think that they do this for a living and they're professionals and they probably have just a smidge more data than we do about practice and understanding what Aller can and can't do. If you want to get him ready to do all of this next season, I understand. But here's the thing. Next season isn't guaranteed either. The transfer portal and NIL are going to blow up a lot of rosters this offseason. And Penn State, I don't know if that's going to be the case of what happens here with the Nittany Lions, but nothing is the future. Nothing is guaranteed. Got to play for the games in front of you.
And the positive thing that I think everybody needs to keep in mind is that Drew Aller continues to gain positive experience, whether it be in practice or the few opportunities he's had to get into games. And you need to remember, Sean Clifford is injury prone. He's come out of games already this season, and that's why we've seen Drew Aller. For me, I want Drew Aller to just be ready, because that situation, unfortunately, I hope it doesn't, but unfortunately, it's probably going to come up at some point. So hopefully that's a good situation for Drew Aller. And you do have a favorable schedule the rest of the way in the Big Ten. However, it's the Big Ten. Anybody can pop up out of nowhere and beat somebody, a la Illinois beating Penn State in 9 overtimes last season at Beaver Stadium. I want to get to a donation here from Josh Gray, kind of what we were touching on about Joey Porter and Marvin Harrison Jr. Why not have Joey Porter Jr. follow Marvin Harrison, a la what we see in the National Football League?
So that's a great point. Especially, I think this is kind of what set the stage in the first half was they put Marvin Harrison in the slot, and then you have Keaton Ellis going up against Marvin Harrison Jr. and he gets like 20 yards on 2 consecutive catches. And then I said at that point, you can't have that coverage ever again. Like, you cannot have that matchup ever again where you have a safety on Marvin Harrison Jr. And this is the situation where Penn State is playing hybrid corners, right? So they believe that these guys are still has cornerback skills. So that is not a matchup they should outright lose, but there's a reason Keaton Ellis is playing safety. It's because he was not at the level of Kalen King or Joey Porter Jr. or Johnny Dixon or even, Marquise Wilson. But Marquise Wilson eventually did move back to corner. So he's playing safety because that's the decision. I think it's a fair point. There are pluses and minuses to doing that in terms of communication. Now you have an entirely new level of communication that you have to do if you're Joey Porter Jr. and the rest of the defense that they haven't done all season. Like, they just don't do that. And to change the structure of the defense where now you've got somebody following on a regular basis, it's not just about Joey Porter Jr., it's about the rest of the defense communicating. And if you get a busted coverage, then you're cooked either way. They did start doing it a little bit later, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is really good. He's done this to everybody all season.
And for those of you that are interested, once again, as I mentioned, the Pater podcast, Pater to Penn State football show that we drop later this afternoon. Filling in for Matt McGloin is former Penn State defensive back Justin King. I will be asking him about his evaluation of Joey Porter Jr. overall and what he thought of his performance in this game. So if you're interested, check out Pater, Penn State football show. It's available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Later on today, we're going to get that out. Just another shameless plug. You'll forgive me. I wanted to dive into another one that Stephen Light had here. Let me see if I can find it here in the super chat. You guys are being fantastic. Stephen, the best thing about the rest of the season is a chance for Clifford to improve his career stats. Well, Stephen, as a matter of fact, today, Sean Clifford became the all-time leader in passing touchdowns in Penn State history. He passed Trace McSorley. He now sits with 78 passing touchdowns. So I guess a backhanded congratulations to Sean Clifford, who I'm sure did not want to break that record in a loss to Ohio State in kind of mop-up time in this game. But still, credit to Sean Clifford getting that record because it's, you beat Trace McSorley, you're doing something right.
Yeah, you played 5 years.
Yeah, you played a long time. Ohio Lion 19, thank you for diving in. Dealing with Ohio State fans isn't going to be fun next week. Marvin Harrison Jr. and JT were the difference. Completely agree. This one hurts, but I think we should have hope. Am I crazy? I don't think you are. What do you think,
Yeah.
T. Frank?
I hate saying things that are going to be taken out of context, right? Or that are going to be sound like, moral victory in a 44-31 loss. But yes, Penn State, Ohio State came in with a very good running game. This was the most balanced Ohio State team I've seen in a long time. They averaged 1.9 yards per carry until the fourth quarter. Then in the fourth quarter, they had 3 carries and they averaged 15 yards. What they did is they went up tempo and they attacked the way Penn State had been attacking. Penn State had just 1 or 2 mistakes. And when you've got a 5-star running back in his second season backing up Mayan Williams, that's another huge part of this game, him going down early and Penn State being able to structurally stop the run with fewer players and play too deep. Because a lot of your wrinkles that you come into the game with, they work for the first half until the other team can adjust. Penn State does run 2 high safeties, right? So they don't run like exclusively one coverage, but running cover 2 man and 2 high looks and things like that is not something they've done a lot this year because they faced athletic quarterbacks. CJ Stroud doesn't run. Like, it's not a part of his profile that he wants to run. So when he sees those coverages, it's like, this is going to sound stupid. It's like playing Tom Brady. You can play certain coverages against guys that don't run, but when you play Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, you cannot play those coverages because it opens up the middle of the field. Ohio State started attacking the middle of the field. Penn State readjusted. They battled back. They had a good game, and the talent at right tackle was a problem today, where when they were forced to throw the football, I actually thought for a good portion of the game, they played with so much balance that it was actually not as big of a problem as I was expecting. I didn't think Penn State could score 30 points in this game, with garbage time touchdown, maybe that's closer, but they scored 31 points. I had them getting to 20. So they scored 11 more points than I was expecting. They moved the ball more than I was expecting because I thought that pass rush was going to be a huge problem. And then in the first half, Penn State, the same game plan. Ohio State was trying to stop the run with fewer players and keep this balanced tight end centric attack in contain. And they couldn't. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't contain the passing attack because Penn State had that ever elusive balance today. But the problem was they tightened the screws in the second half. Penn State didn't get enough points early because of the turnovers, which we've already decided. Like, everyone's already decided whether it's Sean Clifford's fault or not. I don't really care. I don't want to have that conversation. Like, I don't want to have the conversation about fourth down. You've decided whether it's good or bad to go on fourth down. So, these kind of large structural things, Penn State was playing even-handed with the superior team, but they didn't get enough points to survive the late game surge, and then it just kind of snowballed on them. So they played this team well, but talent won out.
Pete, kind of reinforcing your point to a degree regarding Sean Clifford. Sean did what he could do. 2 of his picks and his strip sack were mostly on his O-line getting mauled. I do agree with that. Clifford played well enough to win. Yes and no on the latter. I don't know if it was the greatest game ever. I personally, and I've said this on my podcast a number of times, is that this offense should not be seeing Sean Clifford throwing the ball more than 30, 35 times a game. That it should be under 30, frankly. So for him to be airing it out 47 times, that's just not Sean's game. That's not Penn State's game. So I think there are a lot of things that he was forced to do because of the play of the offensive line, because of the eventual score there late in the second half, that he had to air it out. I think Mike Yurcich got a little trigger happy with the passing game there in the third quarter. Would have liked to have seen him stick to the running game just a little bit more. There was productivity there, but again, we've said it before, you can't pin this all on one person.
Can I counter just a little bit? They were sticking to the run. But it was getting them in third and long situations. Outside of the first play of the game in the second half, where they got a 7-yard run, Penn State was averaging 1, 2, 1, 3. Ohio State came out, and Penn State was the more physical team in the first half. And then Ohio State came back and responded. So the running game was not working in the second half. And I think part of that was Kaytron Allen didn't get as many touches in that third quarter, where basically Singleton was the starter of the second half is what it seemed like. But Kaytron Allen, 12 carries, 76 yards. I think he needed to see the ball a little bit more because it's not all about it's not going to be all about the home runs. Like, that's clear at this point. Nick Singleton is going to get there. He's going to be that guy eventually, but the vision, the tackle breaking is not there right now. I think he needs to physically I know that this is a stupid thing to say that people don't like to hear. He's 217 pounds. He's got a big frame. He can be 225, 226. He can be a physical dominant player. And it's just not right now. He doesn't break tackles the way his running style needs because he's so violent and linear and fast, but he can't break that first tackle right now consistently. Where Kaytron Allen, the elusiveness, the vision, the only thing he lacks is that speed, and he's producing those yardage numbers to keep the team on schedule. But even he, in that third quarter, was not getting the effectiveness he needed to. So Penn State needed to go to the air. And with Sean Clifford, my biggest problem with Sean Clifford today was he kept getting his tight ends murdered over the middle.
Yeah,
he kept
Brenton Strange took a really rough hit.
Yeah, Theo Johnson, Brenton Strange, both of them on, back shoulder over the middle plays, which not supposed to do that there. And then, of course, the throwback to Parker Washington, who they showed beautifully on TV, got tipped twice, and it still got to Parker Washington. So when you're lucky, you're lucky. And some of those decisions were not good. The interceptions, we've already discussed those. Can we talk about some of these players for Penn State football, though? Because Brenton Strange and Parker Washington, phenomenal today. Excellent football.
Agreed. Yeah, no, the tight ends continue to be very good, and I think Mike Yursich is finding new creative ways to get them involved, and especially, you and I were talking about it before we came on here, the tight end for Ohio State, Stover, an absolute mammoth of a human being, and they found ways to create mismatches with him, and I think Penn State is slowly but surely finding ways to do that. I like seeing them line up in the backfield because they do have the speed to be effective out of the backfield, but seeing them stretch the field vertically is a good thing. And again, this is not necessarily hitting a go route, hitting a post route, hitting a corner route or something with these guys. That's not really Sean Clifford's ball. His ball is within 15 to 20 yards down the seam. He can really, really hit that. The thing that was always concerning to me was a number of different plays where we were trying to move the pocket either on a rollout or a sprint out to Sean's right. And then he's inherently, because of play design, throwing off his back foot, which you and I have seen enough of. That doesn't end well. And then you were just talking about the double tip and somehow it gets completed. There were a lot of those plays that were not necessarily because Sean was under duress, but because that was the play design. And I find that a little strange.
Yeah. So part of it is obviously you need to move the pocket to get him away from the pass rush. And when you do that, you create, like, you're splitting the field in you're removing one part of the field unless you're actually talented. You're very talented and you can hit something on the backside from all the way back there. And it just, that's not something that's going to happen. I haven't really liked the rolling pockets a whole lot. Last year they did them a lot too. Yeah. And but it's a certain part of it is necessary in the game plan to keep the pass rush at bay. But it does have obvious flaws, of which you've pointed out, and they got themselves in those situations. That throw to Parker Washington, actually, they're lucky that that wasn't supposed. None of that was supposed to happen. That was, I think, a screenplay, and Brenton Strange was blocking 9 yards downfield. He had just taken his dude and driven him into the sideline. So if they had wanted to, they could have called illegal, offensive pass interference on that play, because that was a totally busted play to begin with. And there were a couple of plays where Ohio State completely sniffed it out on play action. That part of the game really wasn't there for Penn State. So, some plays aren't going to work, but when you're leaning into Clifford's weaknesses, completely agree with that. And by the way, I just want to say this. I understand the frustration with Sean Clifford. No one on this show is defending Sean Clifford. We are telling you what we believe happened in the football game, and there are other factors outside of the quarterback that lead to these situations. I don't think that Sean Clifford can win this team a national championship. I also don't think that a true freshman can lead this team to a national championship. So I just don't have a problem with Sean Clifford playing in this game, because that's what's going to happen. A certain amount of resigning yourself to reality. And Anybody who doesn't bury Sean Clifford to people at a certain point becomes a Sean Clifford defender. Let's just stop doing that. Like, let's have a conversation about things. Let's not do that, which I know I'm talking to the internet, but whatever.
And since we are talking to the internet and you guys are being so generous in the chat, I do want to get out some of your frustrations because this is a zoned event. This is the trust nest. This is Blue White Illustrated. David's comment here, 3rd and 10 and you blitz. What an absolutely moronic call. They killed the blitz all day and you call that. What a joke. Dominate 3.5 quarters. And then crap the bed once again in the 4th. Goonie also getting involved. I'm sick of the half measures and excuses. I'm tired of being good, not great. I'm tired of defending questionable play calling and mediocrity. Believe me, so are we on all those things. I'm just tired. Secondary was found out. Clifford has been found out. I want to dive to a question here in the super chat. Brian, thank you for getting involved. Why does Franklin continue to make statements that tick off fans and unnecessarily so, pausing after Clifford winning the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week? Great to elite from 4 years ago, a loss to Ohio State, yada, yada, yada. You've been in those press conferences.
He said multiple times he's a fiercely loyal person, and he clearly believes in Sean Clifford. To the point that does Sean Clifford have blackmail on James Franklin? Like,
you might worry.
I know. But it's been a situation. The situation is right now that clearly the coaching staff does not want to put a true freshman on the football field. They want to protect him. That's what they're doing. And you've got yourself into a situation with transfers and everything else with Will Levis all the way back to Tommy Stevens, all of these decisions to stick with one quarterback over making a switch. When things have gotten bad, James Franklin has his North Star, which is we picked the quarterback to begin the season. We don't make a switch, other than COVID year and that fiasco. So he believes in Sean Clifford. And when Sean Clifford goes out and proves his own fans wrong, and James Franklin tries not to feed the fire post game, he's going to come back and say something. I agree with you. Didn't need to do that, but he's an emotional person that makes emotional statements from time to time and felt like he wanted to defend his quarterback. The one that I think sits worse with me is the one he made on his Thursday radio show, where you talk about being close in 2016, not capitalizing on it, not investing in the program, and that's why you're here. It can be true. Like, that can be a huge part of this, where they didn't go out and aggressively lean into football and get them the resources and everything that they have now 5 years ago. But it's not why they lost in 2017 and 2018. And that sort of game, politicking, I think is the right word for this. It's unnecessary because people aren't going to care. They're not going to listen to that stuff, whether it's true or not. They care about what happens on Saturdays, the on-field results, and James Franklin has not been an elite on-field coach. So therefore, there are no excuses. There's nothing he could say that would change people's minds, clearly.
Also in the super chat, thank you to Kevin. Marvin Harrison Jr. is phenomenal. Completely agree with you, but let's give a shout out to Parker Washington. Also, way to ball out and go Phillies. Game 2 of the World Series tonight. Go Phils. I'm a big Phils fan. Parker Washington, I completely agree. Absolutely exploded in this game. 11 catches, 179 yards, a touchdown, a long of 58. He was outstanding in a way, T. Frank, that I've said it before on my podcast, Pater, that Parker Washington, in my mind, was just sliding into the same role that Jahan Dotson had last year. And I didn't expect there to be much of a drop-off. Now, I think it's taken him a while to get going and for them to find consistency with him in the passing game. This was his coming out party, clearly. And to do it against the number 2 team in the country, picked a hell of a weekend to do it.
Right? He's been a little less consistent than I expected throughout his career. Let me say that. The first play of his senior highlight tape in high school, I was just like, this dude is for real. Because he's been doing things with those level of ball skills since high school. But because, like you said, because Jahan Dotson was there and Parker Washington is going to be that guy, it hasn't been as consistent this year, but his ability to break tackles and make those catches, like he didn't make the one against Michigan. which led to, again, another kind of blow up in that game. This one he did over and over and over again. So your good players played like good players, and that's why Penn State was in this game. They just didn't have enough good players at quarterback and at a couple other key positions to overcome what was going on around them. And you know, Brenton Strange as a blocker today, I just want to say this again. Brenton Strange as a blocker today was taking souls. It was very impressive to watch. But it just, obviously it wasn't enough. But back to Parker Washington, he's finally turning into the guy that I expected, which is the dude that vacuums in everything.
Yeah, and again, he moved into the same things that Jahan was doing last year in terms of kick return, punt return, whatever you want to call it. And he was the go-to guy today. He was absolutely outstanding. And I think they've been waiting for him to jump up in that role. I think a slightly different athlete, obviously, than Jahan Dotson. Jahan can be a little bit more of a burner, whereas Parker Washington, a little bit more stout and compact. He's still extremely difficult to bring down and quick, but he's one of those compact slot receivers that can do some damage there. I was really happy to see this happen for him because I think, just looking ahead, this is going to be a nice piece of tape for his draft stock at some point in time. Stephen Light jumping in once again in the super chat. No, we absolutely are going to bring up everything that you donate in the super chat. Woohoo, Sean, number one. I am not a complete jerk. And no, you don't have to bring it. We are going to do it anyway. Yeah. I love your coverage. You love Stephen Light, right?
Oh yeah, he's another one of our regulars who's always here supporting the channel. Appreciate you, Stephen. And appreciate everyone here, by the way. So if you want to help us out, you don't have to donate. One thing that would help out more than anything.
Donated and didn't even leave a comment. Thank you, Palantir.
Appreciate that. That's the stuff right there. But like the video, we have 59 likes and there's 500 people watching this video. The more you like the video, the more people that it lets more people know that this is a quality post-game show where we're talking about Sean Clifford and we're defending Sean Clifford to the death, and we're inciting a riot on YouTube. And if you want pitchforks and mobs, hit the like button and they can come hate us, and it'll be good for the video at least. And subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Course. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe to Blue White Illustrated through on3.com. That's $10 to get the subscription from now until next season. That's a phenomenal deal. Palantir actually did find a way to get a comment in, so thank you, Palantir, for donating twice. I agree with your take. We got outplayed by a better team, but did you see enough foundation today that will give us hope that the gap can be closed? I imagine he's alluding to the gap between the likes of Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State, and frankly, the upper echelon of college football.
I don't think this loss is going to affect Penn State recruiting in a negative way, like the blowout at Michigan could have. I understand it's the same old for Penn State football fans, but for 17 and 18-year-old kids that are trying to make their decision where they want to go to school, now there's 1,000 different factors that matter, like NIL, and your opportunities as a business and as a brand. Those are all on the table. So now those matter as much as, do you like the school and the coaching staff, and can you win a national championship, and can you get to the NFL? You've been able to get to the NFL through Penn State, clearly at certain positions more so than others, but it's been pretty clear that Penn State's been able to get guys to the NFL and play well. But the branding, all those things, that's going to be a huge part of the future. So when it comes to the long-term view, I don't know the answer. I think it's a positive environment as much as you could in a loss. Like, a moral victory doesn't exist, but still you played with that team so well. And this is what I'm more interested in, I guess, is the short-term future of, are the people in this chat correct about, here's another 7-6 season. They're going to win one game in the back half after losing this particular game. Or did we see enough foundational strength out of the offense that you trust this offense going forward after getting the brakes beaten off them in the run game by Michigan? Do you think that they have shored up the defense to the point they can play a balanced, competitive game and they can beat these teams like everyone expects? I still will not trust this offense because Sean Clifford is the quarterback, and every single game I don't know what I'm getting from him. But I think that the team overall, the offense is in sync better than it's been all season long. The last two games were, I think, a huge step in the right direction for the offense, outside of the turnovers, which are a huge problem. But they moved the football, which they had not moved the football or had the actual balance they talked about for a long time. Those things I think keep you competitive, and they can help you win against teams that you should beat. That's the whole point about this back half of the schedule is these are teams you should beat. Are you going to smack around the teams you should beat? If so, then I think you have positive momentum. But in the long-term view, nothing to me is settled when it comes to closing the gap with Ohio State until I know that Penn State has a serious NIL situation where they can go out and be competitive in the marketplace to get talent, and that they are going to invest in the football program and the facilities and all the other things that fans don't want to hear about after a loss. But if we're talking about closing the gap with Ohio State, it is about talent and it is about coaching. And they are losing in both. I think they lost less on the coaching side today than they did on the talent gap.
Stephen, once again, jumping in. T. Frank, it's not politicking, it is marketing. There's a lot of layers that go into it, obviously, and you just touched on a bunch of them. To Stephen's point, I do want to bring this one up here from Larry. Thank you for donating in the chat. A lot here, obviously, about some concerns on the defense, especially the 3rd and long. We had brought that up a little bit earlier on in the show. Didn't mix up the blitz and drop linebackers when they showed blitz and drop to confuse them. Turnovers lost in the game. Penn State won on the stat sheet. I guess the view in this game for me for the better part of 3.5 quarters was that Manny Diaz did a really nice job. Just kind of the wheels came off, as you mentioned there in the 4th quarter. We talked about a little bit earlier on is that once Ohio State implemented no huddle, and this Penn State defense was definitely tired at that point in the game. There were a lot of short fields that they've been giving up. It was just the breaking point, so to speak. But what did you think overall of the way Manny Diaz called this game?
I'll start with what we kind of talked about earlier, is that I thought Ryan Day kept Ohio State in the game, or Penn State in the game, as much as Manny Diaz did, in that clearly one of the things he wants to do this year is be a more balanced football team as well, because it's not about playing Penn State as much as it is about playing in the college football playoff, the Big Ten championship. And of course, they're going to circle that game with Michigan, and they want to be a physical team by that point. They want to be a dominant physical team that's balanced. And everything I said about them coming into this game, they want to be that ready for that particular process of going through the best in college football. So there's a dedication from Ohio State to be more balanced this year, just like Penn State was. They do all the same things too. Like, this is the annoying thing I said a couple weeks ago, is like, where's the coaching convention where they all decide we're doing these 6 new things and we're all doing them? Everyone's going to do them, from condensed formations to pistol to running the same concepts out of the same situation. Everyone's doing the same stuff.
Rebrand the option as the RPO.
Exactly.
That's an interesting idea.
So Ryan Day was trying to run the ball to run Penn State out of their 2 high fronts, so then they could take the big shots. And then eventually they said bleep it in the 3rd quarter. They ran the ball, I think, twice to start the 3rd quarter, and then they passed like 7 or 8 times in a row. And the offense started to get going. Marvin Harrison Jr. got into a rhythm. And I agree, in those situations, Manny Diaz has always been aggressive. But I will say, in the first half, the pressure of the defense, like the way Diaz and his personality creates as much pressure as the defense does, because Penn State wasn't getting home on those blitzes, but it was getting CJ Stroud a little bit rattled. So then they keep doing what they were doing and what was successful early on, but Stroud stays strong in the pocket and he throws accurately down the football field into those one-on-one matchups. I agree. I would have liked to see a little bit more balance, but on early downs, they played coverage. They played some robber coverages where they're dropping the safety down and you're trying to jump around, and then Harrison just works behind that, and there's no pressure. So then he gets to get to the second window 12 yards down the field. That was the biggest thing coming into this game, is Ohio State's tackles are the opposite of Penn State's tackles. Both of them are good pass protectors. They have a good pass protection unit. And after watching what happened with Michigan, I was not convinced Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac were going to be able to get to the quarterback, because even on those limited attempts, they weren't able to get to the quarterback. So if you can't get pressure with the front 4, which Penn State was not doing consistently, you do have to do something, because you arrive in the same place of receivers open down the field, regardless if it's man or zone. And I think Penn State got caught in that late in the game when Ohio State stopped throwing screens on 3rd down. Another thing that Day was doing to keep them in the game is fearing the pass rush that wasn't getting there.
Mm-hmm. Diving into a comment here from David, very hopeful for next season. Aller Singleton, Allen, and Big Vega will close the gap next year. I see the confidence there, and hopefully for a lot of Penn State fans, that's the case. I do want to wrap up here on this donation. Thank you very much. And this is very much looking ahead, and more so, a brief look ahead, T. Frank, at what Penn State is going to have to deal with on the road at Indiana this coming weekend. Indiana currently sits at 3-5, 1-4 in the Big Ten. What bowl game can Penn State expect to go to? How do you expect the rest of the season to go, and how do you expect things against Indiana to go?
Like I said, I take nothing for granted when it comes to Sean Clifford and the Penn State offense. They were inconsistent. They have proven more to me in the last 2 weeks than they did, in that lull they had in the middle of the season where they weren't really balanced. They didn't have what they were talking about wanting. They have that now. How healthy is the offensive line? What's the situation at the tackles? Because that's huge. I'm not expecting Landon Tengwall back this season. Just, that was a huge red flag that he was hurt in pregame warmups, and something happened in pregame warmups that's kept him out of the last 2 games now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not good. That's straight up bad. So when you come to now the tackles are hurt, I don't know what Sean Clifford's ecosystem is going to be. And we know he's the canary in the coal mine. So they have to be able to protect the football. He's never played well against Indiana. Like Tom Allen's defenses are challenging. They give you post-snap rotations that nobody else gives you. They always have some quirky, weird thing that's going to frustrate quarterbacks that are, as everyone has pointed out, and I think is fair, college quarterbacks, right? Guys that are middle of the road quarterbacks. Then you got Maryland. I have not kept up with Maryland since early in the season. I don't know what the situation is with Talia Tagovailoa. I don't know anything about that team yet. Of course, week to week, you do the study there. And then you got Michigan State to end the season. At least that one's at home. But again, I'm not counting anything for granted. So on paper, Penn State can finish the season 10-2. So that puts them in a New Year's Six bowl conversation. They'll likely be the 3rd team in the conference unless Michigan implodes. So wherever that lands you, not the Rose Bowl, but a quality bowl that will look good at the end of the year. And I think that's where Penn State's going to land. If I were to just toss a coin and say they finish 9-3, but I do think 10-2 is the reasonable place to feel like they can land, pending all the information we don't have.
There's a lot to be decided. And honestly, as a very cynical Penn State football fan, considering the last 2 seasons, Penn State was perfectly 500. If this season winds up being 10-2 and in a New Year's Six bowl game, I think a lot of Penn State fans should be happy, positive, and hopeful for the future. And this performance today, especially against Ohio State, the number 2 team in the country, you hung with them for 3.5 quarters. There's a lot of things you can pick apart. But there are a lot of things about this game that could have gone really south, a la the loss to Michigan, and they didn't. Yeah. And I'll give a lot of credit to Ohio State. They're good, but a lot of credit to Penn State. They stepped up.
One last thing, and this is kind of a, I think this is an important point to make here. This is where Penn State was before COVID, right in this spot. Now, they did not handle the last 2 years well. Just straight up, it did not go well. But if Penn State is back where they were in 2019, and from everything James Franklin has talked about, if you follow BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, Nate Bauer has been talking about these big picture off the field situations. We've been covering this for over a year and a half now with Patrick Kraft, Neely Bendapudi, the new system in place, the new vision for Penn State football. If that is true, and they are committed to throwing everything into being good at football and to keeping up with the Joneses on all levels, and Penn State fans respond and NIL and all of those things, then I think Penn State is right back into program building. They took a step back the last 2 years, but if they finish 10-2 and they have this result, that's right back where they were. And now you can have the conversation of better or worse every year and all those things. Now, for James Franklin, is the clock running out? It's been 9 years, and I think fans have decided whether it's run out for him or not. But given what we just said and kind of the bigger picture stuff, I do believe the clock is ticking on that. And, it may be not soon enough for you, but there's not a no pressure situation. Penn State, I believe, from everything I understand now, Penn State cares about football and is going to play that way on and off the football field, the way James Franklin has been asking for them to do over the last couple of years. So if all that lines up and all of that is true, I know that there's the no excuse crowd and you don't care about what I'm saying right now. But what I'm saying is you might get your wish, maybe not as soon as you want, but I do believe that this is now the conversation of we're starting, and in 2 or 3 years, if 3 years, 4 years, if this isn't where it's supposed to be, then, those conversations become deadly serious.
Penn State loses to Ohio State by a score of 44-31. Thank you all so much for joining us here. Thank you all so much that donated and got involved in the chat. We really appreciate it. One more shameless plug. If you want to check out my podcast, Pater to Penn State Football Show with myself and Matt McGloin, the recap episode that we drop later on today will be myself and former Penn State defensive back Justin King. So there's a lot, especially regarding the defense, Joey Porter, some of the things you guys touched on that we were absolutely going to address and look ahead the rest of the season. Thomas Frank Carr and the rest of the Blue White Illustrated team, of course, have you guys covered. If you subscribe right now, if you're not already subscribed, it's just $10 between now and next season. So check that out at on3.com and search for Blue White Illustrated's homepage. He's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Tom Hannfian. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Blue White Illustrated postgame show.